Hi, I'm Faith, and this is my devlog for Diagonal Quest, a game that should be finished as quick as possible by selecting gems diagonally. The main goal of making this game is to learn more about Unity game dev, specifically on making levels, procedural generation, and overall concepts of game dev. So last week, I worked on creating procedural levels and determining how fast can a player select gems. It was a C# script, and it was really cool that I can apply my little knowledge on depth first traversal algorithms and recursive functions. A little background about me: I'm a web dev by profession, so I know a little bit of programming, and this part of programming and game dev is really fun for me. Next, I wanted to make the grid with gems on it instead of squares or boxes. I found a tutorial here that made the game just like Bejeweled. At first, my grid looked alright, and it helped me on using prefabs and generating the grid by instantiating them. But I had a problem. The coordinates of the gems were all wrong. One is at the bottom and is generated upwards instead of to the right and downwards. I looked over Google to find a solution, but I couldn't find one that I truly understood, except for this one that said I need to instantiate the objects relative to an empty game object. That was a good starting point for me, but I still didn't know how to make the coordinates go to the right and downwards. As you can see here, the gems are going to the right and has too much space between them. Here are some of my attempts with my grid. This could be another game. After all my attempts on fixing it, I resorted on the basic way of figuring out things: notebook and pen. I realized that the x-axis for each one is the same for each row, and it only changes when we generate them to the right. So after some tweaking, I finally have a grid. Fixing the whole position of the grid now is kind of easy, as we only have to change the position of the relative game object. Next up is one of the hardest part, which is generating the diagonal lines when you drag with your mouse. Thankfully, I can reuse some of my codes from my old diagonally game. What I'm aiming for is to make some zigzag lines as I hit each diagonal gems. So I started playing around with it and added some text to figure out what are the game objects that I have hit so far. Finally, I have tweaked it correctly so that I can go diagonal with my lines starting from the start of the game object until I hit the end of the game object. As for now, we're just hard coding it to have 5 max vertices. But we have a problem because we are able to select the gems that are not diagonally adjacent. So the next day, I decided to incorporate the script that I have made last week to my game. So I added a new C# script called diagonal adjacency and added it to my grid manager. So I copy pasted my script and modified and removed some codes that are not needed. Now I want to create an adjacency validator to my script. Now we know what is a valid adjacent gem. We store that gem game object inside a list. And the key thing here is the position count of linerenderer increments only when we have hit the valid gem. And here is our working prototype for Diagonal Quest. I hope you enjoy it, and see you on the next one.